The Prime Minister faced a grilling yesterday at PMQs after the Metropolitan Police issued 20 fixed fines for gatherings, parties during lockdown at Downing Street.
The Labour leader Keir Starmer even called on the Prime Minister to resign, asking why is he still here. So what does the future hold for Boris Johnson? Deputy editor of the website Conservative Home, Henry Hill, joins us in the studio this morning. Henry, look, he's not going to resign over this, it's quite clear, is he? Even if he's fined?
No, absolutely not. If he resigns, then that's it for him. He doesn't have any chance, as he sees it, to pull it back. Whereas if he clings on, there's probably another 2 years at most until a general election, and that gives him time to try and turn things around with the public, win another legacy. So he absolutely has no intention of resigning.
I suppose there's lots of arguments against his resignation at this period, given the fact that we are in this, tragedy situation in Ukraine. And perhaps the best way to settle it would be at the polls with an election. Let the people decide whether or not this is a matter for them.
I mean, I'm always slightly dubious of this reasoning, because it's always the case that either nothing's wrong, in which case why would you get rid of the Prime Minister, or you can't get rid of the Prime Minister because something's wrong, which if you take them together means that you should never get rid of a Prime Minister, which is obviously something that they would like you to think. I don't know if Boris Johnson is actually central to the British government's efforts in Ukraine. That's mostly being led by the Defence Secretary, but it will be used as cover. And I think what's really the problem here is that Tory MP, you need the will on the Tory backbenches to move against Boris Johnson for this to have any legs. And the Ukraine story is giving them a reason not to do it. Now, I think from the Conservative Party's perspective, they need to be careful about this, because if you look at the Prime Minister's standing with the public, it is well down. And the fact that we're not going to be necessarily talking about partygate in a couple of months doesn't mean it's not going to have done huge damage.
And he's not talking about it now. Yesterday he said, I'm not going to provide a running commentary on all of this. How does he get away with that? If he indeed has had a fixed penalty notice, those around him have closed ranks, they don't want to mention it, and he believes that simply not mentioning it makes it go away.
In the sense that the news will eventually have to start talking about something else. He's right. This is if you cling on long enough and you're shameless enough, eventually the news agenda moves on, more news happens. And I think that he's been helped throughout this crisis by the fact that it's been so strung out. We had the Sue Gray report, but not really, because the Metropolitan Police were getting involved. Now the Metro have announced 20 fines, but they've not said who it is. So at every point, the story's been strung out, and there hasn't been this crisis point that might have led to a sort of critical mass against Boris Johnson. But it doesn't mean that the public aren't paying attention. The Prime Minister's ratings are well down from where they were. And it might be the case that the Tories think they've got through it because he hasn't been forced out, but then they lose in 24.
Prime Minister's ratings are always down at this stage in the electoral cycle, though, aren't they? I mean, you'd expect it. It would be very odd if they weren't. I suppose I just wonder if, with the kicking the can down the road, if there will ever be this day of reckoning, as it were. We were told all along, the minute a fine is issued, it shows that criminal activity happened in Whitehall and Downing Street and that he misled Parliament. Well, that happened yesterday. And nothing's changed. So, even when, if and when he is fined, even when Sue Gray's report is fully put out, will that day of reckoning come?
I suspect that it won't, just because you need... It's not just a matter of the facts, it's a matter of the political will to act. And Conservative MPs are remarkably reluctant, for all their reputation for ruthlessness, to move against him. They really needed a big bang early in the story, I think, to put them over the top. That hasn't happened, and now they're all sort of herding together in the better safe than sorry camp.